All right, we're going over System TES, Talmud Sefirot, Part 6, Nikudim points, called cause and consequence. Cause and consequence is there's a few chapters. It's in two places. Basically, what Balasudam does is he summarizes all the previous chapters into cause and consequence points. Chapter 1, Rejection and Line. Introduction. We shall now explain the order of all the operations made in the Olamot worlds through cause and consequence thus far, meaning how every operation is necessarily generated in all its conditions by its original cause. Number 1. We shall begin with Olam HaTzimtzum, the world of restriction. The Tzimtzum, restriction, was primarily on Bechina Daled, fourth discernment, which is Bechinat Malchut De'en Sof, discernment of kingdom of boundless, called the middle point. However, the Stalkut departure of the Or, light, was from all Eser Sefirot, 10 emanations, and these Rishimot, memories that the Or light left after its Istalkut departure are called Eser Sefirot Igulim, 10 emanations of circles. So what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be going over the phases from 4.3 before the barrier until after the barrier. And we have the Olam Ein Sof, the world of boundless light, which is basically, we've gone over these phases many times. It's basically egoism, where you're building all the different phases within you. So you've got the root phase, which is preparation. You've got phase 1, which is humanity, which is the yellow. You've got the blue, which is the spiritual society. You've got the red, which is the group. And finally, the green, which is the individual. And when you finish this, you reach the end of 4.2. You reach the end of 4.2, and then you shift gears. And what you shift gears into is into the world of restriction, Olam HaTzimtzum. And it also goes through preparation, and we'll go over it in the coming slides, where
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
May not have any relevance. Do the colors mean anything? I know red represents Bina.
So
do these anything right here?
So the colors is we've kept a consistency over all the different slides that I use, right? You could basically say that you've got yellow plus blue equals green, and then you've got red, which is the backside of it. So it's like the opposite of green, which is red, like colorblind sort of concept. And that's why I use those colors. The colors that normally are talked about in, for example, the preface to the Zohar is where red is Bina, black is Malchut, green is Tiferet, and then white is Chochmah. But I use this different color scheme. Also because most of the times when I'm referring to these colors, it's before the barrier, and it just gives they're easier colors to deal with, you could say, and they sort of build up. You've got to build up there, even though they're not spiritually rooted, you could say. So we have the Olam Ein Sof, which is the world of boundless light, which is egoism. And then when we do the switch from 4.2 to 4.3, we stop building our world of restriction, which is the Eser Sefirot Igulim, the 10 emanations of circles, which is basically building our altruism. And it goes through a series of phases, and we'll be going over it in the coming slides. Screen. Afterwards, a Masach, screen, was erected in the Malchut kingdom of the Eser Sefirot Igulim, 10 emanations of circles. And the Or Elyon of a light expanded once more, until it struck that Masach screen in Kli Malchut, the vessel of kingdom. From the Hakah striking of the Or Elyon upper light in the Masach screen, a great Or light appeared called Or Choser, returning light. So what this is talking about is what happens after the barrier, where after the barrier we feel that emptiness, and then we start receiving light back into us, but we only receive the first 3 phases into us, and we reject the 4th phase. And that 4th phase that we reject becomes the returning light. So you've got Olam Ein Sof, the world of abundance light, the egoism beneath you. You've got Olam HaTzimtzum, the world of restriction, Eser Sefirot Igulim, 10 emanations of circles, altruism on top of that, where your sense of self has shifted from your egoism to your altruism. And what you're doing is you're allowing your egoism to come into your new sense of self. You're blocking that intense ego that you built and you had to build in phase 4, so that you'll have it beneath you instead of in you. So what you're doing is you're using it as fuel, because the desire of the intense ego that you have beneath you, it allows you to push yourself forward even though you're in a sense of altruism, of perfection, of flawlessness. So even though you're in a state of perfection, you can still feel urgency and a need to move forward, even though it sounds like opposite concepts. Returning light. This Or Choser, returning light, rose and clothed the Or Elyon, upper light, up to Keder, crown, from below upward. And those Eser Sefirot, 10 emanations, are called the Rosh, head of the Kav, line. After that, the Or Choser, returning light, expanded once more with the Or Elyon, upper light, inside it from above downward. In the same amount it clothed from below upward, before in the Rosh, head of the Kav, line. That Hitpashtut, expansion, from above downward, is called Toch, inner, and Sof, end, of the Kav, line. And these Rosh, head, Toch, inner, Sof, end, of the Kav, line, are called the first Partzuf, face, of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, or Partzuf Galgalta, De'ak, skull face of primordial man. So when we allow the light to come in, there's basically 3 parts to it. You've got the head, which is the calculation, where it's going to calculate how much light it's going to receive in potential and how much it's going to be pushing back in potential. And then you've got the toch, the inner reception, which is when you're in actuality receiving the light. And you've got the sof, which is the end, the emptiness, is what you're not receiving. And you actually get enjoyment in the sof of not receiving the light that you've rejected. And you've got basically 2 screens. You've got the screen of potential, which is Malchut Rosh, the kingdom of head, which is called Peh, mouth. And you've got the screen in actuality, which is Malchut Toch, the kingdom of inner, which is called the Tabur, the navel. So you've got the phase 4, which is rejected in here, and you've got the root, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, which are received in here. Yes, Moshe?
Question on the first. This is this Or Elyon rose and clothed the Or Elyon up to Keter, from below upward. This is my question. My question is, in the beginning, the Or Choser clothed the direct light, and it bounced. It basically returned back up to Keter. Is that like the first part? Like I know, like there's like 5 levels of like how it returns back. It, like according to the 5 Sefirot, does it return back all the way up to Keter on the first run?
Yes, you're talking about in each face?
I guess that corresponds to each face. So can you say that on the first face, can you say that the Or Choser bounces back all the way up to Keter, like the of where it can't go in the Toch?
Yeah, so basically you've got the root phase and first, second, and third phase that you're allowing coming in, and what the way you convert those phases into altruism is because you're rejecting the 4th phase, and it clothes those phases. So it's like you're rejecting light from coming in, and then you can actually see the light that you are actually receiving. It's like the idea of that the sun is shining on Earth, but we see space as black. And you would think, well, if the sun is shining, why don't we see the whole sky light up? And we only see Earth light up. And the reason is because space is not rejecting anything. So even in reality, we only see what is rejected. And if there's nothing rejected, we can't see anything.
Right, but I know I've seen this before on the I guess you could say 5 levels. I don't know if it's 5 levels of masach, but sort of depending on the hardness of the masach itself. Like if it's a harder material, the light bounces a lot further back, right? So can you say that on the first part Suf of Galgalta, it bounces back the furthest?
Yes.
So it bounces back the furthest to Keter.
Yes. The screen is called Av. It's coarse, and then
right. And
as you go through the different phases, Falsofim, the screen becomes more and more pure.
Softer. Yeah, and then softer. As it's softer, basically the light doesn't go, it goes a little less and a little less and a little less.
Right, there's less rebound.
Right, so okay, all right, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, feel free.
I heard something stated, and it was so brief, but I want to clarify. Did I hear correctly that you convert the phases 1 through 3 to altruism through the rejection of phase 4? Is that what I heard?
Yes. And so by rejecting phase 4, which is most of the light, right? Because the idea is that the lower the phase, there's more of it. It's more dense, you could say, more coarse. So by rejecting that phase 4, it clothes the root phase 1, 2, and 3. And by that clothing, that's how it converts into altruism. And that's the idea of receiving in order to bestow. So you're receiving light, but because you're rejecting part of it, that sort of clothes the light you're receiving and turns it into bestowal. One of the examples I give of this is the idea of a syringe, where if you're trying to inject medicine into someone, if you were sticking a needle into them and there was no resistance, the needle would just go all the way through and you weren't able to actually inject the medicine into the person. What allows you to able to inject the medicine to the person is on one hand, you've got the needle going in, but you've actually got the pressure of the syringe that is being pushed back by the skin and not allowing it to go through. So then the syringe becomes the or choser, it becomes the returning light. It's being bounced off the skin, and it actually clothes the medicine, the light that is actually going into the skin. So you can see how if there wasn't that syringe, you couldn't inject the medicine. So what you want is the medicine, but you need something to be rejected. You need that returning light. You need that syringe to be able to contain the medicine. It's why we say that after the barrier, no longer is phase 4 your vessel of reception, but rather the Or Chozel, the returning light, becomes the vessel of reception. And then the question is, well, if I'm rejecting it, how does that become my vessel of reception? What's the concept of the syringe, where the syringe contains the medicine that you're trying to inject into yourself? Yes, Moshe.
Right. So the vessel becomes the Or Chozel, and in this piece that we're reading right here, you can see that Or Chozel serves 2 purposes. Because it expands from above downward and below upward. So it serves 2 purposes here, where it's clothing the direct light that enters the vessel, and then it also clothes the direct light that doesn't enter the vessel. So it serves 2 purposes.
No, the Or Chozel is the light you rejected. The Or Chozel, the returning light, is that phase 4 light that you're not receiving into the vessel. Yeah,
but over here it says that, and then it says, after that, the Or Chozel expanded once more with the Or Elyon inside of it from above downward in the same amount that it clothed from below upward.
So the idea is that the returning light that is going up clothes the upper light, the root phase 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Sorry, root phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, which is going above downward. So it's clothing it. So the returning light is going up, and by going up, it's clothing the root 1, 2, and 3 that's going in. It's not that the returning light goes back in. Otherwise, it wouldn't be returning light. You're not actually receiving that phase 4. If it was just going up and back down, then there wouldn't be emptiness. There wouldn't be an end.
I'm just confused in that last example that where you just saying that it's going up. I don't understand. Correlated to the first three the phases, I guess. The 1, 2, 0, Polish, Aleph.
You've got 5 parts, right? You've got root phase, you've got first phase, second phase, third phase, and fourth phase, right? The idea is that the fourth phase you're not going to let into your vessel. Now the light doesn't change. The light is just going to come in with all its 5 parts, right? It's going to actually be, it doesn't even have the parts. It just comes in, right? The vessel makes the parts in the light, right? It sees the differences, but the light comes uniform, just like, when the sun comes in, and then through all different means you express different colors through it. So all these phases are coming from the creator, from the root, all the way down to your vessel. Your vessel has a screen on it. That screen is designed in Parzuf Galgalta to reject only phase 4, right? So what's going to happen is that the light is going to come in, and you're going to be rejecting anything that's phase 4. You're like, are you phase 4? Yes. So I'm rejecting you. Are you phase 4? No, I'm phase 3. You can come in. Right? You're like a bouncer, the club. And anyone who's phase 4, you're not allowing in. And anyone who's root phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, you're allowing into your club. Right? The thing is, what we're saying here is that it's not like light comes in that way and then bounces off that way. Right? Because that's what you think. You've got light coming in, you've got just it bouncing off to another direction. What it's trying to say is that the light that's coming in and the light which is being thrown back up, which is the returning light, it clothes the light that's coming in. So it's not going to a different direction. It's clothing the light that it's actually coming in. So you've got phase 4 going up, and root 1, 2, and 3 are going in.
Oh, you're saying the light that is being rejected is clothing the light that's actually allowed to go in?
Yes. And that's why I gave the example of the syringe, where the syringe is being pushed back by the skin. When you're pushing on the syringe, right, you're pushing on the edge of the syringe to push the medicine in, right? The syringe is actually being rejected by the skin, being pushed back to allow you to have that pressure to actually push the medicine in. So then what's happening is that it's not like the syringe plays no part. The syringe actually plays the vessel part because it actually allows to contain the light as it's being injected into your skin.
That guy.
Yes.
So is it like a coating, like when the medicine goes in, it goes through your body? Let's just say the body. Let's give an example. So it's like coating it. So is it that you could explain it that way, like clothing but coating it?
Yes. So coating and clothing are synonymous.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so please now can I jump in and clarify too for myself? So the syringe or that surrounding cylinder is the 4th phase.
Yes.
And everything in it is the root through the 3rd phase.
Yes.
Okay, and the 4th phase is all of humanity, everything.
No, the 4th
That's
phase
right.
is not humanity. The 4th phase is your individual egoism at its maximum size.
Which is absorbed and taken in everything, right?
Right. So the idea is that the phase 4, when we talk about the phase 4 being rejected, we're talking about phase 4 in phase 4. So the idea is in phase 4, what you've done is you've reached a point where you've maximized your ego at the end of 4.2.
Yeah.
And then when you shift into 4.3, what you're doing is you're internalizing all the phases within you.
Right.
And then you've got that maximum phase 4 ego within you, and you've got now the root phase, which is you've got your preparation, you've got humanity, spiritual society, and the group internalized within you, right? And you've also got this intense ego. And then what you do is you allow everything in but your intense ego. You leave your intense ego outside of you, you could say, which is by rejecting it, and you're allowing everything in to actually say, this is me, this is part of me.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
That guy, so,
Go for it.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Debbie, I think.
Go for it, Debbie. Oh,
Why does it? Okay. Why does it say? Okay, so after it closed, I'm sorry for banging on you on this.
That's totally fine.
After it closed, when it hit the screen, then it closed. It then says after that the Or Chozer expanded once more with the Or Elyon inside it from above downward. In the same amount it closed from below upward before in the Rosh. What's happening again now? Now it expanded once more. What does that mean?
So you've got you've got two parts here. You've got the direct light going through, and you've got the Or Chozer clothing that direct light. So the Or Elyon, the upper light, is always the direct light.
Right.
And you've got the Or Chozer, which is the returning light.
Yeah, but then it's saying here it expanded once more with the Or Elyon. Like something else is happening here. Like there's two actions being done. That's what's bothering me here on this piece.
So it's what we say. It's not like the light is just coming in and then being bounced off to somewhere else. When the light goes up, right? When the returning light goes up, what it does is it doesn't just clothe it externally. It also clothes it internally. It changes. That's what we said when we said it takes it from egoism into altruism, right? If that egoism is just going in and you're just holding it in a vessel, then how does that become altruism? The Or Chozer,
It's got to go inside, right?
it's going to convert it's going to convert from egoism into altruism, and then you could say part of that phase 4 is injected into the phases and actually converts it into altruism. So that's that. The Or Chozer on one end is going up, but because you've got the Or Elyon, the upper light, inside it from above downwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take part of that Or Chozer with it. It's like, it's like
into the toch, yeah?
Yes, into the toch, yes.
Debbie did right. So she says, so it's like everything in the syringe is being absorbed prior to reaching the top of 4?
Everything in the syringe is being absorbed apart from 4.
Prior to reaching the top of 4.
The 4 is at the bottom, so I don't understand what she's referring to. Can you talk, Debbie?
The opposite, the bottom of 4.
Yeah, the bottom of 4. So you basically got the syringe is that container allowing all that medicine, all that root phase, first phase, second phase, third phase to come into your vessel, to go into you, while that phase 4 is being rejected. You're pushing it up. You're not allowing the egoism to reach your altruistic vessel, your spiritual will to receive, you could say. Any final questions before we continue?
I just thought of something. So by it being rejected and it being used to clothe, to bring in, that's an altruistic movement right there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that action is what allows to convert that egoism and convert it into altruism. Because what you basically got, the reason why we're allowing to receive root phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 is because they are in more, they've got more bestowal in them. That phase 4 is just real intense ego. And then the idea is that you sort of reject and you allow the phases that you can handle in your altruistic state, you actually deal with them first. And only when you go to the second restriction, that's when you actually start dealing with that phase 4. You start breaking it up into, the Galgal Tenaim, the GE, and the Chab, the AHP. We're breaking that phase 4 and you're saying, oh, even in that phase 4, there's ego I can use and there's ego I can't use. Yes, Mark?
Caesar's asking a question in the chat about the upper light. He said, does the upper light mingle with the Or Chozer?
Yes.
The Or is now the only vessel for the upper light?
Yes. Yeah, the Or Chozer is like the idea of the syringe again. where it becomes the vessel of receiving. Because you can't use the will to receive that you were using beforehand, since you're rejecting it, right? So that beforehand, when you had your vessel, you were receiving into it using that attraction. And now you're actually using that attraction in its opposite manner by rejecting it. So you still got that attraction, you still got that desire. Remember that the phases are added on top of each other. So you don't actually lose the first phase. It gets added on top. You get that double tension. So you've still got your ego in this world, in physicality, still desiring stuff and still being very egoistic. But then you have your altruistic side of you, you could say, the creator side of you, looking down and knowing how to use that ego correctly. Yes, Moshe.
One more question, sorry.
Feel free.
Now that you have a will to bestow here, the will to receive is no longer to be used as the vessel here. Can you say that the Partzuf Galgalta is now where the inner light is being received? This is now inside of, now can you say the Partzufim are now the new vessels of bestowal? The Partzufim.
The Partzufim are this whole structure here. So the Partzufim include a calculation of what you're going to receive and what you're not going to receive. And then what you receive goes here, and what you're not receiving goes here.
Exactly. So the Toch of the Partzuf is now the new sort of vessel of bestowal of the creature, because the vessel to the vessel to receive is no longer where the light is going, and we're just using that light now. So now all of the light that's being used is going to be filled in the Toch of the Partzufim. That's where the pleasure resides now.
Exactly. Your pleasure you feel after the barrier is in your inner.
Is in the Partzufim, in the Toch of the Partzufim, right?
Yes. And remember, the idea is it states, so you can still, when you enjoy physical food, you still enjoy it in your ego, just like you were doing before. The enjoyment we're talking about here is spiritual enjoyment, which is basically enjoyment in the concepts, in the attainment, and not with the physical enjoyment. The physical enjoyment you still continue enjoying in your normal ego. It's just to show you that the idea is that those states add on top of each other. So you're still human, and now you've got this soul element, which is part of the creator, and you live with both of them. So you're a god with a human form, you could say. Cause and consequence. Number 2, thus we have before us 10 operations. Number 1, the place where the Tzimtzum restriction occurred. Number 2, the Eser Sefirot, 10 emanations that the Rishimot, memories, laid, called Eser Sefirot Igulim, 10 emanations of circles. Number 3, Eser Sefirot, 10 emanations, called Igulim, circles. Number 4, the Masach screen in Kli Malchut, kingdom vessel. Number 5, Itpashtut or Elyon, expansion of upper light, once more. Number 6, Zivug Daka, mating by striking, of the Or Elyon, upper light, with the Masach screen. Number 7, Or Choser, returning light that becomes a levush, clothing, and Bechinat, discernment, reception for the Or Elyon, upper light. So we can see here the diagrams representing each of the phases. So we've got the place where the restriction occurred, which is we'll see it afterwards when we actually go through it. There's basically, when you go between 4.3 and 4.4, you're building a new set of phases within you, which are going from a calculation of wanting greater adhesion with the creator, with yourself, with the internal power within you, until the Malchut, which is the action of it, and then you go through the restriction. And that's phases 2 to 3, where it's called Igulim. And basically what happens, the light dissipates, departs from the middle outwards, and then leaves memories along the way when it's leaving. That's 2 and 3, which is the Igulim, the circles, which we said that a circle represents the idea of that it's not actually making any scrutinies or discernments on the different phases. So it's not like with the line that we'll see, we see here in number 5, where it's saying, I'm only going to receive root phase, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. When the light is leaving, departing those phases in the world of restriction, you're not saying, I'm not going to receive this or I'm going to receive that. You're just saying everybody out, all the phases out. It's like, but I'm phase 3, no, everybody out. But I'm phase 4, no, everybody out. You're not even distincting. You're just like saying everybody out. You're not even looking at their, at their phase degree. You're not making any discriminations. And then you have number 4, which is, we said the masach, the screen. So the idea is now you've got a screen on this phase 4. You're not allowing anything to go into it. Then you've got diagram number 5, where you're allowing root phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 to come in. And then that phase 4, you're rejecting it, which is in 6 and 7, which is that mating by striking, where it's clothing the root 1, 2, and 3 going down. The phase 4, close it by going back up. Any questions on this?
I have a question. Up until 6 and 7, would you say that all of that previously was only malchut? Meaning, until that returning light starts closing up, what you're describing as a closing, does that mean then that a pursuit begins to be formed? Meaning the other qualities, the other things above malchut?
Yeah, so the idea is that your parzuf is only formed in this 6, 7 stage. So all the stages beforehand are just preparation for your parzuf, and that's one of the reasons why when you pass the barrier, you're not immediately feeling amazing and like, oh, I passed the barrier. You actually feel emptiness at the beginning because the light is dissipating. You're going above your ego, and then sort of the light goes out, and then you're building your parzuf, your screen of, okay, now let's see how can reactivate myself and allow myself to have pleasure once more. So you go through those phases of being beforehand, feeling great, feeling that clear excitement and elevation in 4.4.4 before the barrier. Then you feel that dissipation, that departure of light, and you feel confused, disoriented, and then normally it takes like a few days, and then a few days later you actually get your first, you get the light, you get your first screen, which is the Parzuf Galgalta, the whole operation happening there. Yes, Mark.
On diagram 2-3, I think when you originally went over that, you mentioned that those dotted concentric circles are memories or remembrances.
Yeah, so when the light leaves, it leaves memories of the phases within it. So it's not like, normally where it just like light leaves and then you don't remember everything. Every time it leaves a phase, it leaves a memory of the light that was there. And those are called the 10 emanations of circles.
And these memories or remembrances are different than the Reshimo?
So that's a Reshimo. Reshimo is a memory. Right? Reshimo is a memory of what you had. It's like when you go to vacation, right? That's normally called in Kabbalah like tamim, tastes. Then when you leave your vacation, that's called nekudot, right? Which is points. And then when you remember how it was great in your vacation, that's called tegin, which are the crowns on top of the letters. And then when you remember, but wait a second, I'm not there anymore, that's called letters.
And these are the remembrances that the Kabbalists of the past have written about. These are the things that you write about in addition to help us really identify where we're at. Is that correct?
Exactly. The secret behind all these Kabbalistic books and all these structure stuff are basically states we go through. And by reading it that way, you can actually really help yourself figure out the discernments you need to advance so much faster than if you were trying to advance without this structure. Yes, Moshe.
I'm okay, sorry.
No problem. You just got the hand. Let's continue. Number 8. Eser Sefirot de Yosher, 10 straight emanations, the Rosh head of the Kav line. Number 9. Hitpashtut, expansion of the Malchut with the Or Chozer, returning light, into Eser Sefirot, 10 emanations, from above downward. The first 9 Sefirot emanations of those Eser Sefirot, 10 emanations, are called Betoch, inner of the Kav line, and the Malchut kingdom of those Eser Sefirot, 10 emanations, is called the Sof, end of the Kav line. Number 10, Nekudat Asiyum, the endpoint of the Kav line. From there down, it is darkness and not or light. So you've got here, you can see you've got, we've got number 8, which talks about the Rosh, the head, the calculation. And then you've got number 9, which is talking about the inner, the Toch. It's what you actually receive. And then finally you've got the Sof, which is 10, which is end, it's emptiness, but you're actually having enjoyment from not receiving. And then finally you've got the Nekudat Asiyum, the endpoint, which is where there's no more pleasure, you could say, and that below it is considered darkness. You don't feel any sensations of pleasure. This is basically what we talked about beforehand, and this is the cause and consequence that that chapter 1 goes over. Any questions? The siyum is normally what's written below siyum is olam hazeh, this world. So you basically got below the endpoint is sort of the end of spirituality, where you got the corporeal world. Let's continue. Combination of states. Number 3. Now we should explain the connections of cause and consequence among them. First, the place where the tzimtzum restriction is made is caused by the istalakut or insof, departure of boundless light from there. Thus, the first thing to know is that there is no absence in the spiritual. Hence, any slight change in the spiritual does not mean that the first tzura form is absent from its place, as in corporeality. Rather, it means that the first tzura form remains in its place unchanged in any way, and the change in the tzura form refers to an addition to the previous tzura form. Thus now there are 2 forms instead of 1. So you've got here an example. In corporeality, when I move something on the table from one place to another, it's now only in the new location and it's no longer in its previous location. Well, in spirituality, which is states, when I go from informed to chaos, I still retain my informed. When I join the spiritual society, I've still got my humanity I need to deal with. It's not like I lose my humanity and lose my family and I don't have to worry about food or my kids or going to the bathroom. Rather, I have to deal with that, and now I've got an additional layer I have to deal with. Now I also have to deal with spiritual society. I have to deal with thinking about the world and thinking about the world kli and taking the whole combination of, okay, we've got the creator and we've got the creation, I've got an ego and you've got bestowal, and all these concepts, which that's why it's called chaos, because it's very chaotic, but you've got to deal with these 2 forms in you now. And then when you reach the group, now you've got to, it's not like, oh, so now I can leave the society and just join the group. It's like, no, you have 3 forms now. You have unformed, which is humanity, you have chaos, which is spiritual society, and you also have the group. And then you start working with an individual, like, oh, so now I can leave the group and I can leave the spiritual society and leave humanity. It's like, no, you have to keep them all active within you, because the states are added one on top of each other. And it just gives you more layers of yourself that you have to deal with.
Zach, I had a question regarding the previous slide. I just wanted to make the connection or ask the question if that had to do with Naran High, the previous slide.
This slide, the cause and consequence?
Yes. What is emptiness? Is that the H and the Y, and the tab is at Naran?
No, so the idea is that when we talk about Nar and Chai, which is Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Chida, which are the five differentiations, the phases we see in the light, that depends. First of all, receiving always in the inner, right? So it basically means that the more mature our screen is, the more we can discern and have more awareness of the different degrees of the light. So at the beginning, you've got nefesh, which can also sometimes be felt below the barrier, where nefesh from the word nofesh, it's like vacation, it's like relaxation. It's a light that just relaxes you. Then you've got ruach, which is the second layer of light, which is it can either be wind or spirit. And the idea is that it goes through changes, you feel changes more. So with relaxation, with vacation, with all nefesh, you're just like relaxed in it. While and it actually like disables your discernments, you could say. Because you're just like relaxed, you're like, oh, it's great, I'm feeling great. When you're feeling all ruach, you're feeling much more changes. And one of the Baal Salam writes in Or Bahir that you can only discern or nefesh when you have or ruach. Only when you have that light of spirit can you actually discern names and appellations in the light of nefesh, in the light of the soul. Not the soul. Nefesh is I can't remember the English translation of it, but it's basically representing that light of relaxation. And then afterwards you got, all neshama, which is from the word like neshima, which is breathing, right? So unlike with wind, where it's got changes, with breathing, it's much more targeted, it's much more structured, and then you of course can discern so much more. You have more details, more it's more delicate, right? So the idea is that, but it's stronger. It's like stronger, not in sort of like, oh, I'm strong like that. It's stronger in that it's got so much more in it. There's so much more to attain in it, and there's so much more sensations to feel in it as the lights get stronger and stronger. And that's called Naran. And then you've got Chaya Yechida, which are representing lights that normally aren't fixed. You're not in a state of it, but rather they're states, but then they turn on and off much more than with the Naran, which when you've acquired it, you have it. And then the Chaya Yechida are sensations which you can activate them and be in a state of them, but then they leave you. So they're not your fixed state, you could say.
Okay, I was trying to make a distinction between what you mentioned here, 8, 9, and then number 10. It ends in emptiness. And when you had the drawing of the line, like you mentioned the calculation, and there's a calculation in a reception, but then there's this end or emptiness. I was trying to see what's the difference. What is contained in number 10 that is perceived as end and emptiness, versus number 8 and 9.
So in 8, it's just a calculation. You don't actually feel anything. What you feel is the results of it, and then you know that they're calculations. You can say the calculation is in potential, and then in actuality is 9 and 10. And the difference between 9 and 10 and between the toch and the sof, toch is enjoyment from actually receiving the light, and then sof is enjoyment from rejecting the light, from not receiving the light.
Oh, that makes sense. Thank you.
So it's like, when, like in our world, when you're on a diet and you're eating food, you can get 2 enjoyments. On one hand, you're getting enjoyment from eating the delicious food on your plate. And on the other hand, you're getting enjoyment from not eating rubbish, from eating, sweets and stuff. So you're getting 2 enjoyments at the same time.
So I'm reminded of the example of the host and the guest, where I think that what you're describing is I'm enjoying that I'm eating the food, but because I'm conscious that there's also an enjoyment of eating it because the host is providing it, versus just eating it for the sake of eating it and not knowing that there is, not recognizing that there's a host at all.
Yes. Yeah. So So on one hand, you're sort of like, you could say it's targeted. Right? So normally when you're just receiving, it doesn't have to be targeted, you're just receiving. And then the whole idea of patzuf, it's like targeted receiving. You're receiving for a goal. Right? And the idea is that if you lose the goal, you lose your patzuf, you lose your internal power. Right? And that's, when it's called a shell, when you're sort of moving your sense of self to lower states that you went in before. And then you lose that intensity that you were having in your calculation, in your patzuf, in your face. So the idea is that as long as you're staying on that edge where you're just using yourself to the maximum, but targeted to actually reach a goal, then it's considered you're active. And when you lose that intensity, that's when you're considered passive.
So with number 10, would that be sort of, even though it's emptiness, that's when you're enjoying the internal power, the control that you had over the situation, is it not?
So the actual enjoyment of the internal power is here in number 9, in the toch, in the inner. And then in 10, it's, you could say what you're not enjoying. It's like what you're rejecting, what you're not using your internal power for, that you're actually getting enjoyment for. That you're being targeted with it and you're not just like wasting it and just spreading it around without any goal in mind. You're very targeted. You're enjoying yourself. It's like if someone's going on a business meeting and he's going to a restaurant with clients, right? He's eating the food. He's enjoying the food. But what is he eating the food for? To make the business deal. So if he was normally in the restaurant, he would, feel a bit more freer. He could, take his time. And here he has to be very structured. And even though he's enjoying the food and the food is delicious for him, he's using the food as a way to actually connect with the clients. So he's being targeted about his enjoyment and not just enjoying because he can.
So it's purposeful enjoyment.
Yes. Any questions on this slide? It's quite simple. It's basically, what we said, that you're adding states on top of you. Every time you get new degrees of responsibility, new relationships that you have to deal with differently. So, at the beginning, when in humanity, you treat all people as people. And you're not like, oh, these are Kabbalists or these are people in a spiritual society. You just treat everyone as people. And then when you reach the spiritual society, now you've got two distinctions. You've got the 99% that we normally call them, which are people in humanity, and you've got the 1%, which is people in the spiritual society. And then when you reach that phase 3, that group, now you've got 3 things to worry about. You've got the people which are in the group, like, for example, system concepts. Then you've got the people which aren't in the group, which are in the spiritual society. And then you've got the people which aren't in the spiritual society, which are in humanity. And now you've got 3 sort of calculations how to deal with those people. And then when you have an individual, then you're working with 4 different ways. You're treating your individual one way, you're treating your group another, you're treating the spiritual society the 3rd way, and then finally humanity the 4th way. Spiritual separation. We must also remember that the law of separation in the spiritual is nothing more than the disparity of tzura, form. As the act separates in the corporeal, so disparity of tzura, form, separates in the spiritual. Thus, if the spiritual acquires some change within, it divides and becomes 2. The distance between them is as the measure of the difference of form between them. If it is a slight difference, they are still considered close, but if the disparity is great, they are considered far from one another. So you can see the idea is that at the beginning, we're in humanity. Then what happens is that we find a spiritual society and it becomes 2 concepts. So humanity stays as they were before, but now we've got this new concept to deal with. We've got people in the spiritual society. And then what happens is you get a disparity of form. The more and more you see how humanity is not going in the same direction as the spiritual society. And then the same thing happens when you join the group. Then you start to, on one hand, you've got still the disparity between humanity and spiritual society, but now a new disparity grows between the group and the spiritual society, between people which are focused on the goal and actually want to pass the barrier, and people are just around there for years and just plateauing and just not actually having a desire to pass, but rather sort of enjoying passively desiring the goal instead of actively desiring the goal, which is in the group. And then you feel that disparity of form there as well. Let's continue. Adornment of greater adhesion. Number 4, the reason for the tzimtzum restriction and the histalakut, or departure of light, is that Malchut Den Sof, which is Bechina Dalet, fourth discernment, wanted a more complete Ishtavut Surah, equivalence of form, with the Or Elyon, upper light, as explained above in part 1, Or Pnimi, inner light, and Istaklut Pnimit, inner reflection. It explains that there was not even a slight change made in En Sof, boundless, itself by the tzimtzum restriction that was made, but that this Olam Tzimtzum, world of restriction, is only an addition, renewed over the Or En Sof, boundless light. So what we have here is we've got the 4 phases of direct light, right, which is Malchut En Sof, the 4th phase, kingdom of boundless. And now you've got a new sort of world on top of it, which is, you could basically say, the world of the soul. So this is the world of the ego, and this is the world of the soul, which is an addition on top of your ego. And then that copy, that addition, goes through, we'll see in the next slide, it goes through 4 phases, and then finally does a restriction, and then leaves memories of all that calculation. So the difference between the ego and the soul is that the ego is, you could say, like fuel, but it's not purposeful, it's not goal-oriented. And then you've got the phases that you're basically building in 4.3 until you pass the barrier, which are very purposeful. They're very directed, who are very aware and are controlling your situations to actually pass the barrier. While your growth in the 4 phases were sort of more and more you were getting awareness, but still it wasn't that intensity. It wasn't just like totally targeted to reach one goal, which is to pass the barrier. One of the things when you actually reach that 4.3 is you basically find out that you don't actually have any emotional need to actually pass the barrier. Like beforehand in previous phases, you were like, yeah, I've got this emotion, I want to pass the barrier. You reach that 4.3 and you're suddenly like, wait a second, I'm fine the way it is. And then the question is, well, then why do I need to pass the barrier? And you basically have to find a reason that is not out of a deficiency, it's not out of a lack, but it's rather because you want great adhesion, you want internal power because of internal power, not because of the lack of it. Or like, oh, the reason I need to pass the barrier is because my life is in a terrible state. When you reach that 4.3, you more or less have some kind of control of your environment and your reality, and that's not what's bothering you. And then you have to build in yourself a concrete desire to pass the barrier, not because of you're deficient in this world, but because you really want the quality itself of bestowal. You want that control, you want that power itself, and not because how you can actually use it afterwards. The thing is that Malchut En Sof, kingdom of boundless light, wanted greater dvikut, adhesion. Hence a change of form occurred in her, for that yearning did not manifest in her in En Sof, boundless. Thus it is considered that a new tzura form was added here, and she departed from Malchut En Sof, kingdom of boundless light, and acquired her own name, which is Bechinat Keter de Olam HaTzimtzum, the crown discernment of the world of restriction. So you're going again from this ego, and now you're getting a new phase within you, which is called Keter de Tzimtzum. And this is the first phase you go through when you reach that 4.3, where it's the calculation of why do I want to pass the barrier. And as you progress, what you do is you're building inside of you 4 phases. within you. And then finally, when you reach that Malchut, then you do the restriction and the light leaves the vessel. So read it. Restriction.
You said this is done in 4.3?
What?
You said this is starting to happen in 4.3?
Yes. Yes. Olam Tzimtzum starts at 4.3. Restriction.
Well, I would say it's more of putting starting to include everything into your perception. So why is it?
Exactly. And those are the phases here of including everything into your perception.
Right. So why is it called Olam Tzimtzum?
Because the result of it is the Tzimtzum.
Yeah.
The result of it is the Tzimtzum. So the last thing that happens after the Malchut is that it diminishes the will to receive.
I never saw this before. I never saw that it was written like this before. I'll have to read it again.
Yeah, it's in part 6 of Talmud Sefirot.
No, it just basically tells you right before the bag. I've never seen this before.
Enjoy. Restriction. This Keter crown itself expanded into 4 Bechinot discernments. And when Bechina Dalet, the 4th discernment in it, appeared, wanting greater Hishtavut Surah, equivalence of form, with the Or Elyon, upper light, she diminished the will to receive in her, and all the Or light that was there immediately departed. This is because the entire vessel of reception in the spirituals is the will to receive. Without the will to receive, there is no Or light, because coercion applies only in the corporeal, of course. So the way you advance between 4.3 and 4.4 to pass the barrier is that you start internalizing. You first start with the reason, why do you actually want to pass the barrier? And then you start internalizing the world within you, which is Chachma, wisdom, Bina, understanding, Tiferet, beauty, Malchut, kingdom. And then when you reach that intensity, then the light departs and becomes the tense field of the Egolim, of the circles. So basically, you're going through three main parts, you could say. You've got the first part, which is your ego, which is Olam Ein Sof. Then you've got Olam Tzimtzum, which is your relationship to your adhesion. And then you've got the line, which is the actual reception of your internal power. And that's why, for example, in part 2 of Talmud Sefirot, it's called Igulim v'Yosher, which is circles and lines, where it talks about the differences between them, between those two phases.
Zakai, so are you saying that Olam Tzimtzum only really exists in this 4.3 and 4.4, and then after the barrier, it's already Olam Neshamot?
So Olam Neshamot is Olam Tzimtzum.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
So Olam Tzimtzum starts at 4.3 onwards.
Yes. But you only actually feel it as restriction after the barrier. Mm-hmm. It's like, for example, phase 2, right, the spiritual society, but we feel the point in the heart already in 1.3. The group is phase 3, but you feel the active point in the heart already in 2.3. Phase 4 is the individual, but you actually feel the intense point in the heart in 3.3. So you've always got the main event is always in that point 0 of a new phase, but it has preparation. It has its roots halfway through before in the previous phase. So you could say phase 2 starts in 1.3, phase 3 starts in 2.3, phase 4 starts in 3.3, and then the barrier starts at 4.3. The preparation for passing the barrier.
Zakai,
Yes.
so this one now, like that we're talking about, is it like a sifter? Like you're not concerned with anything. It's like it's restricting anything that shouldn't be there.
Well, it's restricting everything. It's not restricting what shouldn't be there. The restriction is, that's why it's a circle. The idea is it's without discrimination. It's like everybody out.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not actually not saying people that should be there should stay there, or desires that should be there should stay there. You're saying everybody out. It's like when a building's on fire, you're letting everybody out, pushing everybody out. It's like, I'm an employee, I'm working on something important, get out. I'm not an employee, get out as well. You're just not looking at that. You're just saying everybody out. Then when you're allowing people to come back in, you're like, are you an employee? Are you this? Are you that? Like, you're making discriminations. And that's called a line. So a line is making discriminations, and a circle is making no discriminations. This is the last slide we're going to be doing today. 10 emanations of circles. Thus we have explained the operations, which are the place where the Tzimtzum restriction was made, and the Eser Sefirot 10 emanations that the Rishimot, memories, made into Eser Kilim de Gulim, 10 vessels of circles, left. The yearning for equivalence of form in Malchut Ein Sof, kingdom of boundless light, activated both of them together, meaning the Pashtut or, expansion of light, and its Histalkut, departure from there. From them came the third act, the 10 Kilim de Gulim, vessels of circles, because these Rishimot memories that remain after the Histalkut, departure, are the Igulim, circles. Thus, these three acts are necessary and stem from one another. So what it's saying is that when that desire, that yearning for equivalence of form, for basically passing the barrier, that causes, on one hand, the building of the world going inside of you, and then the departure of light as well. So it causes both operations to happen within you. What do you think?
Presented well.
Thanks. The reason I wanted to show this is to give more of a awareness and understanding for people which are reaching that end of that 4.2 where they've built their ego is very intense, and how to sort of direct themselves to able to actually pass the barrier with more ease.
Well, to know what's next. You know what I mean? Like why some things are diminishing and why something, like when you go to different states, you see inside like how some parts are stronger, some are getting weaker. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What normally happens is when your sense of self goes to stronger parts within you, then the previous parts lose their importance. And we've all seen this where, people come into the spiritual society and then they neglect their phase one, and then they lose their job, or they get divorced, or they get into bad terms with their children. And the idea is to show here that you can't get rid of these phases. So when you reach that phase two, you still have to keep that phase one going. And if you don't, you'll live with the consequences of it as well. So you can't just live in phase two. You have to keep phase one and phase two active. And the same as when you go into phase three and phase four and afterwards as well. All the states stay within you active at all times. And you have to take care of them.
It kind of falls right in line with responsibility, that you still have to be responsible for all these things in order to be able to play with your spirituality.
Yeah, it's like, when we're children, our responsibility is very, very limited. Yes, we have to go to school, but normally when we come home, we might have a few chores, but then we're more or less free to do whatever we please. And then as we grow older and older, we're suddenly having to take care of just so much more stuff. We have to, take care of the house. We have to take care of the job. We have to take care of our kids. We have to take care of, what's going to happen when I go and get my pension. It's like, I'm 30. Why do I have to worry about my pension? You have to worry about your pension as well, and worry about your mortgage, and worry about, your payments. And there's so much more and more responsibilities in phase one, just in humanity. And then you reach phase 2. Now you've got just even so much more responsibilities. You have to think about the correction of the world and where the world is going and sort of learn all this knowledge and information. And it's like, well, phase 1 was hard as it is. Now I've got to add this new burden, this new responsibility on me. And then you reach phase 3 and you're like, oh, now you also have to work on cleaning your concepts and you have to start working with friends and sharing states and so forth. And it's like, what? But I still have to be in phase 2 and phase 1 in humanity and the spiritual society at the same time. It's like, yeah, you have to handle all these responsibilities and your responsibilities grow and grow and grow. On the other hand, your internal power grows as well, and then you're able to actually handle these states much easier. After that, you're able to build within you. And that's what the Partsafim Ma'akab mostly is, building different kinds of relationships to how you're going to handle these situations much easier. And that's why after the Parsa, it's a breath of fresh air. You can actually, on one end, you're taking on yourself more responsibilities, be able to handle them much easier. I think we'll end here and into the after party.